and this is just where I wanted to start. And I wanted to start with architecture.
Far away, dude.
Okay, so what is that? So just out of interest, so your interest in architecture. And I was looking here. So
What you got?
And I've got a building that I know that you really love. Pouring water. And an architect who I know you really admire, Frank Wright.
Yeah, well, the Kaufman House.
And so really it was just, what is that?
This is an odd shot of falling water. It doesn't look very familiar to us in this picture.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's a sideways shot.
Well, my brother Dennis says, and I think he's right after some reflection, that falling water is the absolute icon of American art in the 20th century. And this covers poetry, painting, everything. There's one iconic entity, and this is it. I mean, there's nothing else that really comes. There's not a painting or a poem or another piece of architecture that has this stature. It's an astonishing thing.
So you started in architecture. So to what extent was Frank Lloyd Wright an influence, or was it precisely because it's such a pinnacle of excellence off-putting?
Well, Wright's fascinating guy. I mean, I don't like all his buildings. Some of them I think are failures, but the energy of them. Half of the buildings he designed that were built, he designed after he was 60 years old.
Yeah.
Well, he designed thousands of buildings. Nowadays, an architect might design 10.
Yeah.
So where's that come from? What's happened?
Right. So do you think did he know that? Was he kind of a Darwinian architect? Was he generating a ton of different patterns with a view to only a small number?
No, I just think he liked to draw houses.
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
But you do that. So what's the appeal? What's the appeal of... I mean, you draw,
Yeah.
you design, you have Frank Lloyd Wright's tendencies to be totally in control. The house, the furniture, the color of the walls, the choice of the cutlery, the carpet.
Yeah, you want to have a say in as much as you can.
Right.
Although, if Falling Water is a beautiful house, but if you go inside, the first thing you see is a bunch of cheap plywood furniture.
Yeah.
Because when he was designing the furniture for this house, plywood had just been discovered.
Yeah. So you think that's extraordinary.
He didn't know that 10 years later you would find it in cheap motels all over the world.
Right.
And the interior of the house is just awful. I mean, there's nothing you can say about it except that's really ugly, Frank.
Yeah, but that's true of. As you know, one winter I broke into Taliesin, and because it's
in Spring Green.
In Spring Green,
yeah.
in Wisconsin, and it's exactly the same. All of the interior is just falling apart.
Yeah, well, there's no money. There's no money to maintain it.
Yeah.
When last time I was there, I got chatting with the guy who was running the tours, and he realized, that this is somebody I had a little acquaintance with.
Yeah.
So we got to chatting. He said, and he was talking about Wright's deranged wife. And he said, let me show you this. I said, sure. So we went back in the bedroom in the back, and there was a stone wall there. I think only one of the walls was stone, and the others were whatever.
Yeah.
And he said, look at that. And she had painted this stone wall gold. And he said, just trying to maintain the place takes every penny we have. We don't have any money to fix stuff.
But it's not just you're interested in him, right? In Frank.
Go ahead.
And his life. And what is it about Frank Lloyd Wright as a man, in addition to his, obviously we know him through his work, but you're also interested in him and his art dealership and his fleeing from his marriage and he's a very complicated figure. And it's not a pure attachment to the work, it's something about him.
Yeah, well, he's an engaging guy. And outrageous. It's stuff that, like he he was testifying in court one time, and they said, please identify yourself. And he said, I'm Frank Lloyd Wright, the world's greatest architect. And so one of his friends afterwards said, you didn't have to say. He said, oh, no, I was under oath.
Exactly. No.
So there we have it, everybody. Cormac McCarthy and architecture. And I want to highlight some key points in that discussion. McCarthy said that Falling Water was the pinnacle of American art in the 20th century, surpasses anything else. Even his own novels, Blood Meridian. And that's such a massive statement from, in my opinion, one of the greatest artists of the 20th century, Cormac McCarthy. And I'm sure, as you maybe know or don't know, Cormac McCarthy built a house with his second wife. He was a stonemason. He really put the whole house together. I think they converted a barn or something small and added a bunch to it. He did a lot of the interior, and it was still unfinished years later when him and his second wife, I think Annie Delisle, got divorced. So this, once again, just plays on the concept that Cormac McCarthy is a very diverse individual with a ton of different interests, while maintaining being the best writer in the United States. In my opinion, a social life, research into math and science, all of his outdoor hobbies. He was also building a house and studying it. And this just shows how to become good at something. And we'll get into that in a second. But one other thing I want to highlight is that Cormac McCarthy remembered and quoted that instance where Frank Lloyd Wright said in court, I'm Frank Lloyd Wright, the greatest architect in the world. And McCarthy seems to like these figures, these very rambunctious figures that you could say are cocky or very much out there. We hear later on in this interview him talking about all these scientists and these prodigies and people that, these, individuals that you could say don't fit inside the box. They aren't Albert Einstein type scientists. They're more the eccentric one. And so even though we don't have very much about McCarthy in his personal life, seemingly he resonates with that. So I've never been to Falling Water, but we're looking at photos of it now. And maybe someone out there who is an architect or knows about this, would you agree that this is the pinnacle of American art in the 20th century? Because I would disagree. I don't know enough about architecture to see how breathtaking and spectacular this is, because it is. This is one of the most beautiful houses I've ever seen. But the 20th century was filled with a ton of great, not just writers, because that's what we focus on here, but artists. We could throw musicians into that. We're just throwing everybody in. And I don't know if this is the best, but like I said, someone who is an architect and is well-versed in the humanities, let me know and let everyone else know in the comments down below. So if you guys want to see more Cormac McCarthy content, I have a ton on this channel. So subscribe, and I will see you in the next video where I talk about Cormac McCarthy and Martin Heidegger.